Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. So, America continues to wage all-out war to defeat the virus, this horrible, horrible virus. You see how terrible it is, especially when you look at the numbers from yesterday. And we explained why we're extending our nationwide guidelines to slow the spread for 30 days. Together, we have the power to save countless lives. We're attacking the virus on every front with social distancing, economic support for our workers, rapid medical intervention, and very serious innovation, and banning dangerous foreign travel that threatens the health of our people. And we did that early, far earlier than anyone would have thought, and way ahead of anybody else. In this time of need, I know that every American will do their patriotic duty and help us to achieve a total victory. As governments and nations focus on the coronavirus, there's a growing threat that cartels, criminals, terrorists, and other malign actors will try to exploit the situation for their own gain, and we must not let that happen. We will never let that happen. Today, the United States is launching enhanced counter-narcotics operations in the Western Hemisphere to protect the American people from the deadly scourge of illegal narcotics. We must not let the drug cartels exploit the pandemic to threaten American lives. In cooperation with the 22 partner nations, U.S. Southern Command will increase surveillance, disruption, and seizures of drug shipments and provide additional support for eradication efforts, which are going on right now at a record pace. We're deploying additional Navy destroyers, combat ships, aircraft and helicopters, Coast Guard cutters, and Air Force surveillance aircraft, doubling our capabilities in the region. Very importantly, our forces are fully equipped with personnel, protective equipment, and we've taken additional safety measures to ensure our troops remain healthy. Secretary Mark Esper, Attorney General Bill Barr, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien will provide more details. In addition, I'm going to have General Milley, who's done an incredible job in so many ways, say a few words. And also with us, our Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Gilday, who you know, I think you know, and Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Schultz. So I'm going to ask Mark to start, and then we can go. And after that, we're going to take questions as it pertains to this, and then we'll go on to phase 2, which is the virus itself. Okay? Thank you. Please, Mark.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today as we make this very important announcement. At a time when the nation and the Department of Defense are focused on protecting the American people from the spread of the coronavirus, we also remain vigilant to the many other threats our country faces. Today, at the President's direction, the Department of Defense, in close cooperation with our interagency partners, began enhanced counter-narcotics operations in the Eastern Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea. This initiative is part of the administration's whole-of-government approach to combating the flow of illicit drugs into the United States and protecting the American people from their scourge. I want to thank all of our partners in this effort, to include the United States Coast Guard, the Department of Homeland Security, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Department of Justice, and members of the intelligence community for their tremendous support and cooperation. To conduct these enhanced operations, the President has directed the deployment of additional ships, aircraft, and security forces to the United States Southern Command area of responsibility. Included in this force package are Navy destroyers and littoral combat ships, Coast Guard cutters, P-8 patrol aircraft, and elements of an Army Security Force Assistance Brigade. These additional forces will nearly double our capacity to conduct counter-narcotics operations in the region. Additionally, 22 partner nations have joined us in this fight, bringing with them a variety of intelligence and operations capabilities needed to defeat these criminal organizations. Last year alone, United States Southern Command's operations resulted in the seizure of over 280 metric tons of drugs, much of which was designated for shipment to America. While this was an incredible achievement, there is much more work to be done. Transnational criminal organizations continue to threaten our security by smuggling cocaine, fentanyl, methamphetamines, and other narcotics across our borders. These drug traffickers put our communities at risk and destroy lives. Every year, tens of thousands of Americans die from drug overdose, and thousands more suffer the harmful effects of addiction. Furthermore, corrupt actors like the illegitimate Maduro regime in Venezuela rely on the profits derived from the sale of narcotics to maintain their oppressive hold on power. The Venezuelan people continue to suffer tremendously due to Maduro's criminal control over the country. Drug traffickers are seizing on this lawlessness by increasing their illicit activities. We must do more to prevent these drugs from arriving at our shores. These enhanced counter-narcotics operations that are now underway will further disrupt the flow of illicit drugs to America, deny our adversaries the financial resources they depend on, and build the capacity of our partner nations throughout the region. I want to thank President Trump for his leadership and support to this critical mission. This is a particularly important time for this operation to begin. As nations around the world shift their focus inward to deal with the coronavirus pandemic, many criminal organizations are attempting to capitalize on this crisis. The enhanced operations we are announcing today will keep the pressure on these criminal groups and protect the American people from the devastation caused by the flow of illegal drugs into our country. Mr. President, thank you for your leadership as we begin this important operation. While the men and women of the United States military work hard here at home to fight the coronavirus, we continue to take action around the world to defend our great country. Thank you, and I'd like to invite General Milley.
Thank you, Secretary, for those words, and thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership. And I want to publicly thank Admiral Craig Fowler, the commander of U.S. Southern Command out of Miami, for leading this operation, which is underway effective today, and also Admiral Gilday, the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Schultz, for their contributions to this from their services. There's thousands of sailors, Coast Guardsmen, soldiers, airmen, Marines involved in this operation. We came upon some intelligence some time ago that the drug cartels, as a result of COVID-19, were going to try to take advantage of the situation and try to infiltrate additional drugs into our country. As we know, there's 70,000 Americans die on an average annual basis to drugs. That's unacceptable. We're at war with COVID-19, we're at war with terrorists, and we are at war with the drug cartels as well. This is the United States military. You will not penetrate this country. You will not get past Jump Street. You're not going to come in here and kill additional Americans. And we will marshal whatever assets are required to prevent your entry into this country to kill Americans. So right now, the Navy has marshaled additional gray hull ships from both PACOM and EUCOM and for the Naval Fleet at Norfolk. And they are set sail already, and they are in the Caribbean right now. In addition to that, there's 10 Coast Guard cutters, and there's Special Operations Forces and Security Force Assistance Brigades, along with Air Force reconnaissance aircraft. The bottom line is you're not going to get through. Now is not the time to try to penetrate the United States with illegal drugs to kill Americans. With the United States military, we will defend our country regardless of the cost. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks for your decisive leadership as we confront this unprecedented challenge posed by coronavirus. And I'd like to thank you for your support for this important initiative, and thank all of the Secretary of Defense and all the services for taking on this important initiative. Obviously, during this crisis, we're all focused above all else on COVID-19. But at the same time, our law enforcement and national security work must go forward, protecting the American people from the full array of threats. For the Department of Justice, one of our highest priorities must remain destroying the Mexican cartels. Their trafficking is largely responsible for the deaths, as we all know now, of 70,000 Americans a year. And also the costs of this don't count the destroyed families, the destroyed lives, the draining of our national treasure as state budgets are crushed by the burden that this narcotic trafficking causes. The President has made clear that we are in this fight against the cartels to win, and that we are not interested in half measures, and that the threat posed by the cartel is not just a law enforcement threat, but a national security threat as well. And in December, building on your success with the Mexican president in forging a cooperative relationship in the area of immigration, you asked me to go down and meet with the president, Lopez Obrador, and our Mexican counterparts to see if we could also establish a more comprehensive and coordinated effort with the Mexicans in confronting the cartels. And we've had some successful visits and discussions, and currently have an array of activities underway against the cartels. And we anticipate, along with the Mexicans, that these are going to bear fruit in the months ahead. But it quickly became clear that we can obtain the most immediate results, the best bang for the buck, where we increase the assets involved in interdiction on both the Pacific and Atlantic side of Mexico and the Central American countries. For years, the cartels have been using these sea routes to take the cocaine up from principally Colombia, now also out of Venezuela. And these sea routes on both coasts have become the primary means of bringing cocaine up to the United States. Because of the superb work done by the Defense Department and our intelligence community, we know exactly, most of the time, where these traffickers are at sea. But have been up till now, significantly limited in our ability to interdict because of the numbers of the assets we have deployed. Prior today, this limitation meant we could only intercept a fraction of the traffickers and the various boats that were detected. This will now double our capacity, and we are talking about hundreds of tons of cocaine now we're now in a position to seize. So this is going to radically improve our interdiction efforts and put tremendous pressure, we think, on the cartels. And the effort that Southcom is undertaking is going to save lives by taking drugs off the street. Last week, I announced the unsealing of charges of narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, and other crimes against the former Maduro regime, 16 members of that regime, and their involvement in trafficking of 250 metric tons a year. A lot of that comes by sea, as I discussed at that time, but also because of the pressure we're applying by our sea interdiction, they are trying to establish an air route out of Venezuela up into Central America, which is one of the reasons we're trying to move firmly against that corrupt regime. This drug war has gone on for many decades, and at times in the past, we've had great success and great results, and at times we've taken our eye off the ball. Fortunately, not in this administration, and I'm grateful that you, Mr. President, have brought focus to this fight and the determination to use whatever tools are necessary to win the fight. The cartels have to be defeated, both for the people of this country and for the people of Mexico and Venezuela. So I'd like to thank you again, Mr. President, Secretary Esper, for providing the wherewithal required to help win this war against the cartels and others who seek to send illicit drugs into our country. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ambassador O'Brien.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. President. Today's action is another example of the bold leadership of President Trump and his commitment to protecting the homeland against threats that seek to destabilize the United States and our Western Hemisphere. The uncontrolled flow of illegal drugs into the United States poisons our communities, fuels the dangerous epidemic of addiction, and threatens the safety and security of all Americans. The impressive U.S. Navy, Coast Guard, Army, Marine Corps, Air Force, and interagency operation will address a range of threats to our national security posed by narco-traffickers and narco-terrorists. It will reduce illicit financial support for drug trafficking that provides the corrupt Maduro regime in Venezuela and other bad actors with the funds necessary to conduct their malign activities. Under President Trump's leadership, we will continue to execute our maximum pressure policy to counter the Maduro regime's malign activities, including drug trafficking. And this operation will help to choke off the funds that go to that corrupt regime. Maduro, narco-terrorists, and criminals should make no mistake that even as we are working around the clock to fight the spread of coronavirus, we will continue to execute the President's counter-narcotics strategy. We are working on a number of important national security priorities as we face this public health crisis. The United States will continue to combat disinformation and fake news about this virus. We will work with the world's largest oil producers to address volatility in global oil markets. We will always protect our servicemen and servicewomen around the world, including in Iraq and Afghanistan. I want the American people to know that President Trump and Vice President Pence and their administration are working tirelessly every day to protect the health and well-being of Americans and respond to the coronavirus. Our adversaries should take note, however, this president has a clear-eyed focus on America's national security interest. And let me be clear, it would be a mistake with terrible consequences for any adversary to attempt to do us harm during this health crisis or ever for that matter. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
So as we deploy our service members to combat both threats abroad, invisible enemy at home, earlier today I spoke to our nation's incredible warriors and military families. Spent a long time on the phone with thousands and thousands of families that were hooked in. In order to stop the spread of the virus, some of these families have delayed planned moves to their next duty station. And in other cases, military families are also waiting longer to welcome home their heroes from deployment. There's a tremendous burden to bear, and the families have been involved with us for so long, and they are incredible. Without the families, they couldn't be the great service members that they turned out to be, and they understand that. And I must say, protecting our military families is our top priority. So they understand what's happening with respect to the virus, and they understand it well. They've been fantastic. As Commander-in-Chief, I'm deeply grateful for our service members, their spouses, and their children, whose love, devotion, and sacrifice keeps America strong. To make, procure, and deliver crucial medical supplies to our doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers, my administration is leveraging the might of American manufacturing supply chains and innovators across the industry and across every industry. And I just told you about Walmart, and I could tell you about many more. Hanes is making protective gear and masks, and we're making tremendous amounts of product. There's never been anything like it. At the same time, I tell the governors, get it yourself if you can from your local companies and your local warehouses and factories. If you can do that, you should do that. Because of the actions that we've taken under the Defense Production Act, manufacturers and suppliers are sharing with FEMA and HHS their planned orders and allocations to states and to hospitals all over the region. This enables FEMA and HHS to work closely with states, local governments, and private sector to allocate critical resources to highly impacted areas. Working together, we're entirely focused on getting materials to the right place at the right time. So we wanted to go directly to a hospital or directly to a certain state location, and ideally not even hit the state's warehouses. If we can avoid the warehouses, it's even better because they go directly into a hospital. And one example of that is Ohio, the great state of Ohio. Senator Rob Portman called today, and he asked for some help and got us, did a tremendous job, along with Mike DeWine, the great governor of Ohio, to facilitate a donation of 2.2 million gowns. 2.2 million gowns. Think of what that is, 2.2 million, to the Strategic National Stockpile from Ohio-based Cardinal Health. Cardinal Health, we appreciate it, and they're making much more than that and different types of things. We're profoundly grateful for their contribution to protect the lives and safety of our healthcare professionals. Cardinal's been working with us very well. FEMA and HHS formed a historic partnership with the private sector called Project Airbridge to bring supplies from other countries to the United States, including gloves, gowns, goggles, and masks. These supplies will soon be distributed around the country. We have large cargo planes coming in from various parts of the world, Every day, new plane loads are landing in cities such as New York, Miami, Chicago, Los Angeles. Additional flights have been scheduled, and we're adding more and more. And they're actually coming in ahead of schedule. A lot of these flights are coming in with a lot of material ahead of schedule. The amount of usage, the amount of need is something that nobody's ever seen before. We are getting so much, but no matter how much we get, they seem to use it up very quickly. More than 17,000 National Guard personnel have now been activated all across our country. On Tuesday, the Vice President sent a letter to the governors calling on them to have plans in place to use the National Guard to move medical supplies from warehouses to hospitals. So a lot of times we'll deliver supplies to a warehouse in a state, someplace in New York or in New Jersey or in Connecticut or wherever it may be, and they're having difficulty getting it moved. So what we're doing, if we don't bring it directly to the hospital, is we've authorized, it was a special authorization, the National Guard to go into that facility and to move it for the state. So the National Guard is moving a lot of this equipment and medical supplies into a hospital or into an area where it's needed by the state. As I said yesterday, difficult days are ahead for our nation. We're going to have a couple of weeks, starting pretty much now, but especially a few days from now, that are going to be horrific. But even in the most challenging of times, Americans do not despair. We do not give in to fear. We pull together, we persevere, and we overcome, and we win. This week, every American heart is joined with the people of New York as they continue to bear the brunt of the pandemic. To every New Yorker, please know that we are by your side. I love New York. And every day we will be with you. And it could very well be that others take over from New York. There are some areas, some hot spots in other states that are really exploding. Some, like Louisiana, were very late. And then all of a sudden, it was like an explosion. In confronting this deadly plague, America is armed with capabilities never dreamed of in past centuries. You look at 1917, the pandemic, it was something, ravaged parts of this country, but ravaged Europe, ravaged. They say 75 to 100 million. Some people say 50 to 75 million. People died. Think of that. And that was a long time ago, over 100 years ago. Many books written about the 1917, 1918 pandemic. Our doctors are poring over the virus genetic code, designing potential therapies and vaccines. Our planes are airlifting supplies from every corner of the earth. We're watching other countries, and they're watching us to see whether or not and who's going to be the first to come up with a cure or a remedy of some kind, or even a help, if it can help. And, of course, a vaccine. We're looking very strongly for a vaccine. Johnson & Johnson is doing well, and other companies are doing very well. But our most powerful asset, our greatest weapon in this effort, is the spirit of our people. And we want to keep away, keep a distance, keep away. If you don't get it, it solves a lot of problems. If you don't get it, and you can't get it if you keep the distance. American spirit is unyielding, unwavering, and unbreakable. It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it, the way the people have pulled together, the unity of this country. So together we're going to win this war, and the sooner we do, the sooner we can begin to rebuild, and we're ready to rebound and return to normal lives. We went from the best economy in the history of the world, the best economy that this country has ever seen, the best employment numbers we've ever had, 160 million people working, almost 160 million, to a point where the professionals came to me and they say, "Sir, you're going to have to shut the country down." I said, "What does that mean?" They said, "Sir, you're going to have to shut it down. And we're going to build it up, and I think we're going to build it up fast. I think we're going to have a tremendous rebound. There's a great energy and a great pent-up demand. And as you know, phase 3 was terrific, and phase 4, what passed in Congress, and phase 4, if that happens, will be great. I already proposed a paying almost zero interest on bonds. And I proposed a $2 trillion infrastructure plan, which would not only fix our roads and highways and bridges and tunnels and other things, but will also do something very good. It's called jobs. I'm also asking that restaurants and entertainment facilities go back to the old deductibility from corporations, where corporations can buy, because otherwise a lot of these restaurants are going to have a hard time reopening. It takes a long time, and they're going to have a hard time reopening. So we're asking for going back to deductibility, where corporations can buy and corporations can go out to lunch and they pay and they get a deduction on what they eat. They get a deduction on the bill, and same with the entertainment. It's going to bring a lot of people back. I think it'll open up the restaurant business. People forget that years ago they had that, and when they got rid of it, when they ended it, for whatever reason, but they ended it, many, many restaurants went out of business. Many entertainment-type facilities went out of business, and now's a great time to bring it back. It was a terrible time for that business after they ended it, but this is a great time to bring it back. It'll keep our restaurants going. In fact, I think the restaurant business will be actually bigger and better than it is right now. So we're also talking about that.